One final point concerning habituation concerns something we saw in Book 1 of the Nicomachean Ethics. In Book 1, Chapter 4 of the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle restricts his audience. He says certain people shouldn't study ethics. In Book 1, Chapter 3, he says young people shouldn't because they just follow their passions and they're inexperienced. But then in Book 1, Chapter 4, he mentions habits. He says only people who have been raised in good habits should study ethics because only people who've been raised in good habits grasp the facts, or what the Greek literally says, grasp the that. And when we were going over this material, I tried to explain that grasping the that, what Aristotle means by that phrase, but grasping the that, he means being able to make correct particular moral judgments. Only people who have been raised in good habits can make correct particular moral judgments. His idea is, and we kind of got this even from Book 1, Chapter 4, that our character and how we are raised deeply affects the moral judgments that we make. So, for example, I've been using an example of a child, little Johnny, who takes a toy, and maybe his parents correct him, maybe they don't. Let's take let's say little Johnny, his parents don't correct him, right? So he takes a toy from little Susie. I don't know why they're all little. Doesn't give it back. His parents look over at him and they just kind of smile and, oh, little Johnny. And so little Johnny, oh, this is great. Now I got the toy. My parents don't care. Right? He's going to keep doing that kind of thing. He's going to develop a habit for being selfish. He's going to come to expect to just act that way. Well, Aristotle's idea seems to be that by being habituated in that way, that's going to affect the kinds of judgments that little Johnny will make once he's big Johnny, once he's all grown, right? That's going to affect the judgments or beliefs. It's going to affect how he lives, right? Someone who is raised like little Johnny there, who's raised not to share, not to give things back, they might, when they grow older, right, their judgments might be askew. I think Aristotle would think they will be. They might think that, a certain kind of greed or selfishness is entirely appropriate, right? You got to look out for number one, after all. And they might justify and rationalize it and think it totally appropriate to act in a selfish way. They might be the kind of person who, when somebody else drops their wallet, Big Johnny might be the kind of person who goes and just picks up the wallet and keeps it for themselves and, discreetly walks away. Because they've formed their character in this particular way. Aristotle's point is not so much about the vices, but about the virtues, right? And so if you're raised in the virtues, if you're raised to perform just actions, when you are older and you can make moral judgments, you will more or less make correct ones, right? Someone who's been raised well, who's been raised to always give back toys that they take, who's been raised to share and so on. When they see Big Johnny go and pocket the wallet, they'll say, that's not right. That's unfair. Or if they see the wallet drop and then somebody else give it back, they'll say, yeah, that was the right thing to do, right? Because they've been raised in that way. They have that character. They've been formed with those habits, right? The habits we have, in large part, determine the kinds of moral judgments that we make. And only if you've been raised well will you make the correct moral judgments. And those moral judgments are the very basic starting points of ethics. If you can't correctly judge that, taking the wallet is unfair and unjust, you don't need ethics. You need to reform your character. You don't need to listen to somebody blabbing on about, virtuous rational activity or whatever. That's not going to do anything for you. You need to reform your character. right? And so let's imagine we have a greedy fella, right? He's got all the money. He's a super rich guy. And he's just hoarding all the money for himself. He doesn't want to give it to anybody else. He don't want to share it. That's his money, and he's not going to give it to anybody else. He don't want to be generous at all, right? And so he's like your 1%er. There you go, right? Not the well, whatever, right? He's a real super rich guy, and then someone comes along and says, "Hey, look at you with all that money. That's not right. It's immoral for you to have all that money. You really ought to whatever, share it or dole it out or whatever, right? Justice requires and blah blah blah." And let's say this person tries to like reason with them, tries to give them an argument, tries to use a little ethical theory, right? They took a class on ethics and they learned all this cool stuff about ethics, and they try to break it out on this guy and say, "Look, here are the reasons why you can't do that." Right? Let's say something like that happens. Aristotle's idea is that that's totally in vain. This guy who's coming up to the greedy guy and telling him, "Look, you got to share," or whatever. Why? You're just wasting your breath. Because what's that greedy guy thinking? He's not going to be thinking, "Oh, wow, very interesting. Yes, maybe I should." No, he's going to be thinking, this guy, he's just jealous. He just wants the money for himself, or he's just this self-righteous dupe. He's naive, whatever. He's going to think all kinds of, right? He's not going to agree with the guy. Well, why not? Because that greedy guy is greedy. He's formed a certain kind of character. And look, he's old. He's got, he's whatever. He looks kind of old. You got wrinkles and a beard and bald and stuff. Yeah. His character it's been self-reinforcing for, I don't know, how old is that guy? 60? For 60 some odd years, say. You're not going to change his character by all of a sudden giving him some argument, right? The argument, that's not going to work. What that greedy guy needs is for his character to be changed, because his judgments that hoarding all this money and using it all for me, that's fair, that's what is appropriate, that I don't need to share it or be generous at all. His judgments there, right? Those flow out of his character, and that character has been formed over many, 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 many years, right? He's been habituated to this over many, many, many years. And some argument, even if it's a great argument, even if it's a philosophically sound, philosophically compelling argument, right? Let's say that other guy over there is giving just this amazing argument, right? Doesn't matter. It's not going to do anything, because that argument is not going to reform a character that's been formed over 60 some odd years, right? What the greedy guy needs is to have his character reformed. How does that happen? Well, through habituation. How do you habituate an old person, an adult? How do you reform their habits? Aristotle's whole point is you don't really. That's really, really hard. Maybe if somebody went to prison and you kind of compelled them, and you could compel them to act in certain, but that's not the case with most adults. Once your character is set, Aristotle thinks, it's set, and you're going to be making the judgments that you're going to make. And so if you're making incorrect moral judgments and you're an adult, Aristotle wants to say, look, don't do ethics, right? It's just pointless and in vain. You're not going to get anything out of it. You're not going to be convinced because your character is warped, right? That's Aristotle's idea. That's why only people who have been raised in good habits should study ethics. It's not that the other kind of people who've been raised in bad habits, don't need help. They do need help. It's just that ethics doesn't provide that kind of help. Ethics isn't going to do anything for that person, because what we've seen now is that they have a vice, and that vice is leading to these incorrect judgments and these incorrect actions. And that vice is a matter of character, a matter of habituation. And so what really needs to be changed is their character. How do you do that? Well, forming new habits, right? That's really hard. And so when you have bad people Aristotle's view seems to be you're just kind of stuck with them. Once they're adults, you're just kind of stuck with them. If they're in your community, you just have to learn to deal with them and hope they don't, hope for the best, hope they don't do anything terribly wrong or bad or detrimental to the common good.